Victim radio.
No e-girls, not even once, not even one time.
Victim radio.
Not even one time. Never. Do you know what never means? You know what not even once means? It means not even once. Never.
Victim radio.
Never. Times. No e-girls.
Victim radio.
Never.
Victim radio.
Never.
Victim radio.
Not even once. No e-girls. Not even once.
Victim radio. Victim radio.
No e-girls. Not even once. Not even one time.
Victim Radio. This is Victim Radio. You are now listening to Victim Radio.
No e-girls.
Today we have Oliver Traldi.
No e-girls. Not even once.
He is a philosopher at the University of Toledo's Institute for American Constitutional Thought and Leadership and a visiting fellow with the Emerging Scholars Program at the Mercatus Center. He received his doctorate in philosophy from the University of Notre Dame. Greatest hits include Snowflakes for Hamas in Tablet magazine and his book Political Beliefs. A philosophical introduction is available from taylorfrancis.com.
You will listen to Victim Radio.
Victim Radio.
Welcome back to Victim Radio. We have Oliver Traldi here with us. Welcome, Oliver. How's it going?
It's going well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were promoting the episode on X, we saw that your account was actually deactivated. Would you tell us a little more about your break from the timeline?
Yeah, of course. So I deactivate my Twitter pretty regularly. I just tend to find that I'm basically incapable of using it in a healthy manner. As I spend, several months in a row there, my thoughts increasingly become sort of dominated by whatever the discourse is there, and my social life becomes increasingly based around the group chats that I'm a part of,
Oh,
and various, dynamics in them. And once this has been going on for a few weeks, I just decided this is no way to live, and I try to reconnect and touch grass and things like that.
yeah,
But
touching
I've been
grass
doing
every.
this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say touching grass every once in a while is nice.
Yeah, I find that, and I think I've been doing this deactivating and reactivating for, I don't know, several years. I don't know exactly when it would have started, but um, I think it really helps me. It helps me use the platform in a sort of healthy way, and I also sort of like, I tend to be over available. When I'm on Twitter, I'm on there all the time. It's really easy for people to be in touch with me and things like that, and it can be good to sort of enforce a little distance on myself as well.
Yeah, being hard to reach, that can be appealing at sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that you definitely have a lot of people engaging with you. So I can sympathize with the break from X for a little bit. You're currently doing a postdoctoral fellowship at Princeton, correct?
No, that's a few years ago.
All right, so
Um,
what are you doing now?
yeah, so right now I live in Toledo, Ohio, where I'm a professor at the Institute for American Constitutional Thought and Leadership, at the University of Toledo. And
Okay.
I have a fellowship in DC at a think tank called Mercatus. So I'm sort of flying back and forth, which is a lot more exciting than my life normally is. So I think for the past couple months, I've been in a plane basically every week. Um,
How do you feel
and
how's that going for your body?
you know, uh, at least I'm moving. Um, I have a bad habit. I mean, I think the way I describe Twitter probably reflects this. I have a bad habit of if I'm not forced to move, I take the most efficient route and just sort of stay in the same place all day. So I think it's been good. And also, I think if I were in Toledo 24/7, or whatever the right term is, if I were in Toledo all the time, every day, um, I would lose out on a lot socially. There's a lot more people I know in DC, a lot more uh, connections I've made on Twitter, off Twitter. I have family there, so it's been really good going back and forth, to be honest. It's just a little, for a really lazy person like me, it's a little tough having two jobs at times, but they're both pretty undemanding jobs. People are letting me sort of do my own thing for a little while, so that's really nice.
Yeah, that does sound nice. Flying, I've always wanted to nut up and decline like the X-ray machines at an airport, but I haven't had the opportunity to do it because I feel like that's just going to compound and compound and compound eventually. I always
Yeah.
feel, yeah, I always feel very exhausted after being on a plane, and I notice that it dehydrates me. Taylor, when was the last time you flew?
Um, like it would have been a holiday, I guess. I don't fly very often. I don't, off the top of my head. No, maybe like 5 months ago, maybe. Not
All
a
right,
holiday. Yeah.
how did it make you feel?
I mean, fine, because I don't, I do these like short flights that take like an hour, like to go to the city like an hour away. I don't really
Yeah.
do it. Yeah, it doesn't really, if I did it more, I'm sure it would affect me more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't used to like flying. I went to grad school in Indiana and I would take the train cross country. So I would take like 18-hour train rides to get back to the East Coast for holidays. That was how much I didn't like flying.
Hmm.
Um, but last year I lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I taught at the honors college there. And there was just like no way to get out of Oklahoma other than flying. Um, so I got really used to flying. Um, and yeah, there wasn't really another option. So now I'm kind of used to it. And It's really weird, but there's not really an airport here, so I usually Uber to the Detroit airport from Toledo, which I don't know, it works out better than I would have thought.
If you can do those, whatever it's called, those fast pass through the airport security, it seems like it would be way easier.
Yeah, I'm always very worried about missing flights, so I usually get there like 2 hours beforehand anyway. Um, I think I'm not going to stop doing that. I'm pretty risk averse person, I think.
Yeah, I don't have that. That whatever those programs are called. Emily, do you use those programs?
No, I don't really fly that often, but I am getting my real ID soon. So I tried to get my real ID earlier this week, and I for some reason have my birth certificate in my wallet. And so I take it out of my wallet and I give it to them. And they're like, "Well, this is all torn up." I was like, "Well, it's my birth certificate. They're like, you need to order is it's my document. Here's my document." And they were like, "You need to order a new one." And I'm like, "Are you sure? Did you did you check with all hierarchies that you cannot accept this?" And I'm not speaking how I'm speaking to you now. I'm using my nice girl voice. And they were like, "Yeah, we asked our supervisor and they said we can't take it." So I had to order it off of like the complete garbage whatever third party they're processing birth certificate requests from for Winnebago County, Illinois. But yeah, that was an entire thing. So let's move back. It's fun talking about flying and everything. That's kind of like, would bureaucracy be like the right term for that? Like waiting in line at we call it the MBD here in New
Yeah,
Mexico.
yeah.
So just kind of like the super slow, waiting, I suppose. Oliver, can you share with us what your kind of day to day looks like with these two roles?
Yeah, I mean, usually I have a few writing projects I'm working on at one time. Uh, and I have to spend a lot of the day just consists in sort of like working myself up to actually work. Um, I usually have at least one paper from somebody else to give comments on, whether helping them out or doing a peer review or something like that. Um, when I'm in DC, I usually have a presentation to give or somebody else's presentation to go to. We have a weekly research group here. Um, so yeah, just a lot of writing, finishing things up. I tend to think about things a lot before I start writing them, which means I always have a lot of projects on the back burner, um, which I sort of wish weren't the case. But like right
You
now, I'm finishing a paper about redefining words. Um,
Oh,
I'm finishing like a personal essay about this experience I had in February, actually about flying, actually. When
interesting.
it took me 96 hours to get back to Oklahoma from New York after a wedding because of fog, and then I was missed rebooked, and then there was a blizzard and stuff
Can
like
you
that.
disclose where that will be published?
I don't think it hasn't been placed anywhere yet.
All right.
Um, I like there's a sort of DC based outlet called Wisdom of Crowds that I like for some of this more personal stuff that also still has a philosophical bent. So
Do you think
I
that do crowds
sorry, go
have
ahead.
wisdom? Do you find
Do
that
crowds have
crowds
wisdom?
do they have it?
Now that's a deep question. Um, I think it depends on the internal makeup of the crowd. Uh, you need a sort of crowd where people are disagreeing with each other to an extent for it to be wise. That's the insight of the Marquis de Condorcet, who was an Enlightenment mathematician and statistician. Um, so if the crowd all agrees with one another, my sense is it's usually going to end up being dumber than basically any individual. But if it's a sort of diverse crowd where there's a lot of, and I don't mean like demographically diverse, but like diverse in opinions, um, then then it works out better. Um,
Word. Taylor,
yeah,
do you have any
Yeah, I have a question
commentary
about
on
that. Or
that?
I have a question about that. Okay, what about
yeah.
for
Go ahead.
what do you think about for like how that pertains to the market? Because of like the crowd buying something.
Yeah, so the market is a kind of crowd with a specific structure. So one of the things I like about markets, let's say you're at a concert, whoever you guys like, Charlie XCX or Taylor Swift or Lana Del Rey or whatever your taste is. Um, and if everybody else is cheering, you have all your incentives are to also cheer, right? All your incentives say do what everybody else is doing. Then you won't get punished for disagreeing. Um, you won't have people won't mob you or whatever. Um, whereas in a market, in general, things are less costly. The more the sorry, the less other people are doing them, the less costly they are, right? So when demand goes down, um, so does price. So if you have, so for instance, the sorts of markets I think about the most are prediction markets. Um, so if it's like, what's a good one? If it's 2016 and you're betting on the Democratic primary in Michigan, and it costs 96 cents on the dollar to buy a share saying that Hillary Clinton will win, and it costs 4 cents on the dollar to buy a share saying that Bernie Sanders will win. This is because most people think Clinton is going to win, right? So
Yeah.
you can add your opinion very inexpensively if you disagree with people. Whereas in most settings, most crowd settings in life, it's actually very expensive to add your opinion when you disagree with people. It's actually more expensive to disagree than it is to agree. So the nice thing about markets is it's actually cheaper to disagree than it is to agree. And I think this is part of why markets can work well, especially prediction markets.
Hmm. What
Do you
about markets
see
for, sorry, what about markets for
you can
like
go
just
ahead, Taylor.
consuming? What about markets for just like, the crowd decides to, I'm not talking about a literal crowd at a music venue, but like the crowd meaning a large group of people. They don't have to be all in one building. Like, everybody decides they like such and such product. Then it seems like, do you think then the crowd is being like dumb, or do you think the crowd can be intelligent? Like everyone decides to fuck with a certain product, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, they might have plenty good reasons to like the product. I think yeah. So I think if everybody likes a certain product, it probably has certain virtues. But we also do, just in my own experience, you also see products that seem basically the same as others that become really expensive for reasons that are hard to fathom. So One that I remember recently was these, and maybe you guys know more about these than I do, and maybe I know nothing about them. But there were these like Stanley Cups. Do you know these things?
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
yes, that was a couple cycles ago, but I do
okay,
recall
yeah,
the
yeah.
Stanley Cups.
I'm always a couple cycles behind. It's just one of those things about me. Um, but it just seems like a normal cup to me. Um, and so I probably was missing something, but um,
Well, I think it's a form of virtue signaling. It's saying, "Hey, I care about the environment." But then you have people like putting little stickers and trinkets on it, kind of like there was one TikTok or something where some woman was connecting Stanley Cups and Labubus and saying that they're child replacements for like millennial women
mhm.
because they adorn them with stickers. The Labubus get little outfits and haircuts or whatever. And it's just kind of like
Yeah,
some weird Animal Crossing-esque role play to fulfill some sort of urge. But in my opinion, the water bottle thing, I mean, that's been a thing since like that became popular when I was in high school and I graduated in 2015. Like everyone was had a swell bottle is what everyone had. And I would say
mhm.
it was more about virtue signaling that you cared about the environment and that you were trying to be zero waste or something. I tried to be zero waste when I was 21 and I lasted about like 2 months. It was terrible. But something interesting, I would bring a mason jar into the Starbucks and everyone would ask me, "What is that?" Like, it's a mason jar. You can go get one at Target for $1. And they would ask the baristas, like, "Do you guys have mason jars?" And the poor baristas would be like, "What are you talking about?" Just everyone was so infatuated with the fact that I brought in this giant mason jar because it looks different. It looks
Yeah,
like an item for someone to have and it says something about them. Do
yeah. I
you have
remember the
any takes on that?
not really. I
No.
do remember mason jars being big with
I mean
one thing I find
in
one thing I
terms of the
find
water
interesting.
bottles.
Yeah, yeah. So Mason, I remember when I moved to New York after college, most places I went to eat would put my drink in a mason jar.
Yeah.
Um, and I found that very jarring, so to speak.
Yeah.
And this was at the height of sort of, or maybe not the height, maybe it had already started falling off, but this is the hipster culture of Brooklyn.
Hmm.
Um, one thing that I found interesting, and I think you know a bit about this just based on what you write about and who I see you interacting with and things like that. Um, I feel like the hipster culture sort of moved to the like I think of Dime Square as basically a hipster culture, right? Um, so like people in it dress like people of the same age but left wing did like 20 years ago. You have some of the same odd like zero waste or like dumpster diving, things like that. Um, that you don't have basically anywhere outside of hipster culture. Um, I was wondering what you thought about that. Like, what do you make of the because you sort of do writing and you do reading in the like fiction spaces of sort of this this so-called like right wing set of people. I mean, how do you think it fits in culturally?
Yeah, so that saying it's the new, so you're saying that Dime Square and I feel like Dime Square has been over, and I recall on Instagram I saw that like in Japan at H&M you can buy like a shirt that says Dime Square on it, which is hilarious.
That's
But
really, really
that's
funny.
yeah, it's like that's their idea of like American culture.
Yeah.
In terms of calling it hipster, so I would say I was coming of age like in peak hipsterdom in Rockford, Illinois. And it really
Yeah.
revolved around like coffee shops, bookstores,
Mhm.
bars that maybe I went to, maybe I didn't. I would say that it was more like hopeful than Dime Square, I
Mhm.
would say. I would say that
Yeah.
Dime Square is more connected to like the resurgence of indie sleaze. I mean, you look at something like Film oh 01 from Angelicism, that's very accelerationist, that's very
Okay.
cynical. I would not connect that to like millennial hipster rhetoric at all,
Mhm.
actually. So I would say whatever is replacing Dime Square. Now, I would almost say that Dime Square came out of alt lit like whatever culture
Yeah.
alt lit behind left behind after it collapsed, I think in like 2018, 2019. Dime Square also could have been connected to like the isolation of the pandemic. where everyone is like constantly on their phones or whatever. Because like podcasting was very big during the pandemic. That's when
Yeah, yeah.
like Red Scare, Come Town, those were all taking off during that time frame. Um, that's how I would answer that question. So to put it more concisely, I would say that Dime Swear is not a reaction to millennial hipsterdom. It's more of a movement birthed from the remains of alt-lit, and it's more closely linked to the revival of indie sleaze, which I would say is very accelerationist in nature. Taylor, do you have any take on that?
No, but I love that answer that you gave.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
that's a very sophisticated answer.
Well, thank
Um,
you. I do try
y-
hard.
in the hipsters, there were, so within the old hipsters, there was this divide between the cynics and ironists on the one hand, and this sort of there was this movement that somehow I'm forgetting, but it was the new sincerity, I think it was called.
Hmm.
So you had a very ironized age, which was part of hipsterdom, and then you also had this react, and I think they were both inside hipsterdom. Um, the new sincerity was like Dave Eggers, and I don't know if David Foster Wallace would count, but it's sort of like you know, the sort of maximalist, you know, hysterical realism type people who had often sometimes like, you know, positive messages, or maybe we're starting to find religion again and stuff like that. Um, and you know, I do think that there was I made reference to this. I wrote an article in 2018 reviewing a book by Jordan Peterson and a book by the Chapler Trap House guys. And I was sort of like, there does seem to be an irony versus sincerity thing coming back in our culture then. Um, because everybody was trying to reach, I mean, I think what a lot of people were trying to reach, and maybe still are, there was some, Jordan Castor had some like masculinity discourse on Twitter today that you might have seen.
Yeah, we saw
I think
that.
a lot of people are trying to reach these like, there's just these question about the lost young man, right?
Yeah.
Um, and there's a
The
question like,
literary young man is
yeah,
there
yeah,
was a piece about that way the death of the literary young man or something.
interesting. I'm gonna Google that really quick, see where that was.
Yeah, I want to see
Um,
where that is too.
oh, maybe this is a maybe here in the Times.
The
And there was all this stuff
disappearance,
about
yeah,
there's all this stuff about performative readers.
Oh yeah, the performative
disappearance of
male. Yeah, the
literary
idea.
men.
Yeah, the performative male is such an interesting. I mean, everything is mediated through video now. So of course all readers are going to seem performative, but um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, the whole videoification of reading and people posting, you know, all the erotica they're reading or whatever on TikTok or Book Talk or whatever. Um, it's very, very confusing to me. And I
But
also think,
by performative, aren't they also talking about just people not recording it, but just reading in public, like a big thick book, like Gravity's Rainbow on
Yeah,
a phone?
yeah,
a
yeah,
different
yeah.
kind of a different kind of performative male. We talked about this a little bit in the Matthew Gazda episode. Would be like the people posing with the book Schadenfreude. Like I have no idea what Schadenfreude is about. I don't need to. I have no desire to read the book. It looks like it's too long. I enjoy reading and consuming media that makes me feel good. And it's not going to be like Infinite Jest or Schadenfreude or whatever. It's not even necessarily going to be like something hyper contemporary like Tao Lin or I remember
Yeah.
I had this viral post about what it feels like to be 28 on this website, and I put like the expat lit symbol, and then Mira Gonzalez's book, "I Will Never Be Beautiful Enough to Make Us Be Beautiful Together" or something. I I would say that when I think of the term new sincerity, I'm thinking of that cadre, Cadre, I believe that's how you pronounce it. I'm thinking
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that
yeah.
cadre of like mid 2010s alt lit writers like Steve Rogenbuck, for example, or Heiko
Mhm.
Julian. To me, that is what new sincerity means. But I pulled up and I know that this isn't really a reputable source. I do not let my students use it. It does say this Wikipedia article, it says Miranda July, Tao Lin, Rogenbuck, Mira Gonzalez, and some other people that I'm not
Mhm.
aware of. And I feel like you were talking about millennial hipsterdom. I feel
Yeah.
like mumblecore. Mumblecore, I wouldn't say necessarily films like Garden State are mumblecore, but they're like connected to mumblecore in some way.
Yeah, they're like
In
emotional mumblecore.
Yes, yes, emotional mumblecore is the perfect way for it because there's this sense of like failure or arrival, especially in films like Garden State, Zombieland. What other ones am I thinking of? I can't really think of any other ones off the top of my head because Garden State is always the one I go right to.
Yeah,
But yeah, so there was like this kind of like hopefulness that kind of slowly eradicated and then like really brewed into something like ugly, cynical, disinterested in the best interests of humanity. And then that's when we
yeah,
kind of get like I guess that you could really cement that, turn that lack of faith into like Bernie losing, for I guess a lot of online people.
yeah,
But in terms of like literature, I know that we had DM'd back and forth about this a little. There is a little bit of a right wing writing cultural renaissance going on. And you see that from people like Passage Press, New
yeah,
Ritual Press. There's some other presses probably out there that I'm not aware of. And then we had spoken about this a couple minutes ago. Jordan Castro had some big take on masculinity today.
yeah.
How do you guys feel about that? Do you guys think that there's a right-leaning cultural renaissance occurring right now?
I
You guys
think
feel
you'd
like
have to be.
it's
I think you'd have to be really optimistic to give an unqualified yes in response to that. Just because I think if you look at the right wing cultural production, people are obviously interested in art, and the taste is getting better. But even compared to like you know, so Tao Lin, obviously a pretty good writer, some pretty interesting ideas. I first encountered him, I forget exactly when, but somebody linked me to it was maybe 2010 or 2011. He had something online called it was something like this poem is a little ebook or something like that. And it
Yeah,
was
that
like
sounds
really
about right.
yeah, it was really precious, but there were like clever things like like a poem that's like a bear narrating how he ate a salmon and then he felt so sad and like looked at the moon and he felt fake and stuff like that. And it's just like it's really precious, but it was like unique. And it like took a certain kind of chance. Um, and wasn't necessarily connected. So I think one problem with the idea of a right wing cultural renaissance is that I think art you have to be connected to your culture, but you also have to disconnect from it to a certain extent. Like you have to take this the sorts of chances that you don't take when you say, "Oh, I'm going to write this novel because it's what people on Twitter are talking about," or "I'm going to make this movie because it's like relevant to the discourse." Um, I think it's important for people to sort of have more distance from the discourse than they have, and maybe even to not be self-consciously part of a right wing or a left wing culture, or even part of like an ironic or sincere culture. I think I have an ideal where the artist has a certain kind of um, monkish separation from certain sorts of events in the world, and isn't trying to like win one over on the libs or like win one over on girls from Hinge or whatever,
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Um,
there's a lot of so this is something, let me try to put this into words. I would say that kind of the casual, like almost harmless misogynistic attitude of like original alt-lit when we're talking about like 2010s, you think of
mhm,
like um Heiko Julian. Well, maybe more like sexual impropriety is more
mhm,
appropriate. You think about like Heiko Julian, Richard Yates, the novel, Steve Rogenbach. There was huge backlash to that, and that's kind of what blew alt lit up originally. And now in 2025, we're having people like there was one person who followed me and I soft blocked them because I read their Substack and I just couldn't stand it. It was my worst boyfriend, or the worst
mhm,
boyfriend, and his profile photo was of Shinji from Evangelion. And he just wrote this entire, like, from what I understood, from what I read, he was writing about like deceiving women, traveling across the country to sleep with different women or whatever.
mhm.
Another one, oh my goodness, I just had it and I just lost it. There was another one that I was thinking of. Taylor, can you think of anyone similar to what I'm? Oh, Delicious Tacos. So Delicious
Mhm.
Tacos speaks about women very frankly. Some of his
Yeah.
posts about women I find offensive. I've never met him. I'm sure he's a great guy, but some of the things that he says about women, I don't particularly care for. So whereas we had this kind of more behind the scenes closed door like sexual impropriety or whatever in Outlet 1.0. Now we just have like full blown like hardcore misogyny, like in this new version of Outlet. And I feel like sometimes maybe that is a little bit of a defining factor in like the new literary scene. But there's like other female writers who trend towards the right that challenge that kind of like callous
Yeah.
misogyny.
It's
I mean,
interesting.
go ahead.
Do you, so I mean, you're as a female reader of Delicious Tacos, does he come off as, I think I really like Delicious Tacos. I think there's something sort of episodic about his writing where it's sort of like, okay, I'm going to read. It's like, it's more. I think he would be a great TV writer. When you're sort of like, okay, it's time for another episode of this.
Yeah.
And they all have a certain amount in common, Um, but I feel like he's actually in some ways a good example of, like, he's obviously, well, I think I've never talked to him about it, but I assume he's reacting in part against like the feminization of literature and the lack of male perspectives, and he's sort of inserting like a very aggressively male perspective, um, having to do with, this is a masculine attitude towards sex, this is a masculine attitude towards love, if you work as a fry cook, then there's probably some teenage girl who you're trying to sleep with who works at the same restaurant,
Yeah.
um, and that I think these are kind of important perspectives, but I feel sometimes that there are great books that have to do with, like, I don't know if you know the campus novel Lucky Jim.
Mm-mm.
Um, I'm forgetting the author is either a father or a son of another great writer, but I'm forgetting the name for some reason. But a lot of the novel is about the guy meets this woman who's already with somebody else, but the other guy sucks, and he just comes up with all these elaborate plans, and he has to figure out how he's gonna like win this woman over and separate her from the other guy and stuff like that. So it's masculine in that it's about like desire and sexual desire, but it's also there's like a lot of like it's also masculine in that there's like strategizing and he's kind of at war, and it's very tactical. Um, and I feel like there's something the although male
There's
sexuality is made very dangerous in the highly feminist and feminized culture that we're in, there's also something where, because sex is like a lot easier to come by, uh, because of the sexual revolution and different sexual mores, the whole idea of like having a whole novel where the male character focuses on one person and just tries to sleep with this one person the whole time and has to come up with all these schemes to do so. Um, it actually has a certain like kind of romance that I don't think we have in a lot of contemporary writing about sex, because it just it usually doesn't feel that difficult to achieve, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. So that's an interesting bridge to the concept of autofiction. So there's been quite a lot of discourse about autofiction in Taylor and I's literary community over the past year, especially revolving around relationships and how explicit is too explicit to write about. Is it a diary? Should you read it out loud at KGB if it's just a diary? Where should the line be drawn for women writing actual fiction, or if they're writing basically like erotica, like self-insert
Yeah.
erotica? Do you have any takes on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a real danger in autofiction. Of course, there are well received. Infinite Jest was autofiction to some extent, and The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man was autofiction to some extent, and Ben Lerner, who I don't like that much, was autofiction. Um, I think I think autofiction. So there's two trends that I think lead towards autofiction in some ways being like the only kind of fiction that people can think they can write. One is the sort of like identity politics, like, oh, you can't understand, you actually can't really understand somebody else's experience,
Hmm.
especially if that person is like part of different groups than you are. And so it's like, okay, if I can't understand somebody else's experience, I better not write about it, right? I better just write about my own experience. So that I think is pretty pernicious. And then there's just sort of like the broad narcissism, right? Um, where it's sort of like we spend so much time telling stories about things that happened to us to begin with. I mean, you know, we go to therapy and we say, look at this horrible thing that this person did to me, and everybody says, oh,
Hmm.
this person had borderline personality disorder and you're an abuse victim or whatever. Um, and you have these like, Taylor Swift and basically telling all the stories of her life and that being, her musical career, I guess, and people loving that. Um, and I think I'm kind of talking about a bunch of random things here, but uh, I think that those are two things that lead to autofiction that make me worry about it because I think those are not really good social trends.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say that as an educator, so I taught 9 through 12 for 3 years. And I think about these students, let's say they go to the University of New Mexico. And well, let me backtrack there. Let's say that they're going to NYU or they're going to somewhere in the SUNY system and they're exposed to all of this kind of auto fiction that seems to glorify sex, drugs, rock and roll, other
yeah,
stuff that's not good for young people like 19, 20, 20 year 21 year olds to be getting into. That's kind of my issue with very sexual diaristic autofiction because I feel that young people are vulnerable and that it sets, I would argue, and I'll go ahead and say it, I think it sets a bad example, is what I think.
yeah, it's interesting. I have a line in this piece that hopefully will be published soon. I got edits on it today, so I have to look at them. But I have a piece about a few movies that came out uh last year, I think. Challengers and Nosferatu and Baby Girl. Just
Oh,
a piece about like sexual rivalry and rough
yeah.
sex and things like that. Um, and one of my lines in it is that basically most writing is about sex now. Lowbrow writing is about good sex, that's like erotica, and then highbrow writing is about bad sex, right? So if you think about
Hmm.
something like Cat Person, I think
Oh, that's
people
one I
understand.
haven't, yeah, I haven't heard that one in a while.
Yeah, yeah, but I think it spoke to something and it made a real splash. But I also think part of what it spoke to was I think people have a concern like yours, and they think, well, first of all, we shouldn't, there's something wrong about just saying sex, sex, sex. Just have sex all the time and it's so great.
Hmm.
On the other hand, there's also like the idea that sex is good is also very boring, right? We all have, we all know that sex can be fun, right? And so you have
Hmm.
these stories that are like, look at all the ways that sex can go wrong. Look at all the horrible things about sex. But I think it's basically the same genre, right? The sort of negative erotica of something like Cat Person, um, I think basically is essentially part of the same culture.
That
There were
person
these,
had to have been like, what was that, 2019? That was a couple
yeah, I think
years
maybe
ago.
2017, maybe 2018.
Oh, okay, so even
Um,
farther back.
yeah, I actually reviewed her short story collection that ended up published in. I thought just all really really bad, to be honest. Um,
Yeah, I feel like
reviewed it.
a lot of that kind of fiction, like, and you see this with auto fiction too. There's some young female writers who think, "Oh, I'm going to go write a story about this guy who did me wrong." But I mean, like, it's good for her season. Women can be villains too. You can write about like you can illustrate the relationship with the full stroke of the paintbrush. It doesn't have to entirely be the man is a villain. And this is a little bit of a, I guess that you could say Cat Person and the film Gone Girl are probably in the same prestige category.
Mhm.
But I feel like Gone Girl is more honest than like any auto fiction we're seeing coming out of New York right now from young women.
Yeah, that's interesting. There was this sticking with sex writing. There was this the cut. I mean, they might still have it. They had this thing called the Sex Diaries, Um, and one thing that I noted about these was that they had, and this is actually, I think, in the end, something I liked about them. They made sex not seem good or bad, but mostly like boring, because it was all about like, it was all these people who were dating a bunch of people, maybe polyamorous, maybe cheating, I don't know. But it was all about like, oh, I had to schedule this person, and then we did this, and then you just sort of like list the stuff you did, and then like, okay, then I was off to this meeting, and then I saw this other person. And it all seemed like very, very bureaucratic, you know? Um, very much like I don't know if you know the effective altruist, but they're, you know, like their ideas like ethics, and I don't even know, I'm not even saying this wrong, but ethics is sort of like a spreadsheet, and you sort of want to make the numbers of like how much pleasure people are having as high as possible. Um, and so obviously having the pleasure is enjoyable, but people who live that way, they're writing about it. It's going to feel like reading a spreadsheet to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's becoming kind of formulaic. Like, I don't know, Punnett squares is what came to mind immediately for me. So I do want to ask you this. Where
Yeah.
do you think I don't want to say the word renaissance. Where do you think the revitalization of the trad wife came from in relation to all of this?
Victim Radio. Victim Radio.
Like what you see? I hope you do, because there's plenty more where that came from.
Victim Radio. 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 Victim Radio.
Oh yeah, good question.
Do
I
you
mean, I'm
think
gonna
that it,
like,
go ahead.
so I've talked about trad wives with plenty of women, and I mean, I want to ask you before I answer that. I want to ask you, and sorry for answering a question with a question. Like, do you think the trad wives are like an honest phenomenon? Like, do you think is there an actual rise in trad wives? I know that there's a rise in trad wife content, but I feel like if you being a content creator for trad wife content is almost like incompatible with actually being a traditional wife.
Well, look at, so
Um,
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't intend to cut you off. Was that the
no,
rest
no,
of your
you know, you
question?
go ahead. You go ahead. I'm good. I
Yes.
said my thing.
So my take is going to be a little unorthodox. It's going to be tainted by what people on X get pissy with me about, but I
Mhm.
think that young women are so sick. Young women have the highest incidences of chronic disease. Young women have so much hormonal imbalance in their bodies that's resulting in things like depression, a lack of drive, no interest in working. And you compound that with like the world that we're living in now, where it's super difficult to get a job, and going to college for most people who are a few years younger than me, it may not be worth it to them unless they truly know what they want to do. I can see how young women, when their bodies are so compromised and sick, and they're prescribed birth control and antidepressants and benzodiazepines from like the onset of puberty, and they can't fully act in their power, I can 100% see why they would say, screw it all. I'm going to let a man take care of me. Screw it all. I don't want to work. I'll have a kid. Whether or not they'll be an efficient mother to that kid is another question. But I can see how young women who are so frustrated and tired and sick would throw every opportunity they have out the window to be with a man who takes care of them. But I also think, and well, that doesn't set them up for a happy marriage. It sets them up to be abused. And that's my issue with the trad wife movement. Now, you look at someone like Erica Kirk, and people can say, oh, she's an Aryan princess, she's a Nazi, she's a trad wife, she doesn't think women should work. She's absolutely not like that at all. I'm pretty sure that she has like her Juris Doctorate. She has a clothing line that I hope does not
Yeah.
produce clothing made from polyester. But she's a very, very high powered woman. And she still shows up as a mother, like she shows up very well and takes care of her children. So maybe being a trad wife is about being an active wife and an active mother more so than submitting. I mean, you look at what Nick Fuentes was on Red Scare today, and I think back to like I thought he doesn't strike me as someone having a very high opinion of most women.
Yeah.
I do enjoy the young lad, but he he
He
has
has the
some
standard like gay misogyny, right? Like gay men have a certain kind of misogyny that is like so beyond what straight
oh
men are usually
you're
capable of.
you're breaking my heart, Oliver, but I think you're right. That is that is kind of
I'm
what it.
sorry. There's not that
No,
there's,
it's
as they
okay.
say in Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with it. That's just my impression.
No, I was saying you're breaking my heart because now I don't have a chance. But anyways, no, I agree that it's definitely kind of like queer coded misogyny that definitely goes back to like millennial hipsterdom. Like it could even go back to like the early 2000s. That's
Mm.
definitely something that can be observed. But his idea is that a woman should sit down, shut up. I think that he's joking. I think that he's a little bit like Tucker Carlson when he was on Fox because Tucker
Hmm.
is playing a character. I think that Nick is inhabiting a very exaggerated version of himself. But he's like, my wife should shut up. My wife should cook me every meal, and my wife should be prepared to be hit if she raises her voice at me while I'm playing video games or something. And he's only a year younger than me. Men don't really like come to everything like probably until like 32 or 33, I would say. I would say women kind of like have everything together by like 25, 26, like brain wise. But he has this really maladapted idea of a trad wife, whereas I think Erica Kirk is the empowered woman, despite what
Yeah.
liberal women believe about her. So I hope that answers your question. I feel like I went off on a little bit of a tangent there.
No, definitely. I mean, but this is in a way part of what I'm interested in this piece. Like the thing that interests me is not I mean, it's crazy to me. To me, it's like obviously, I think it's because I love women so much. That if I hear somebody say, if I have a wife, I don't want to hear her talking, like you must, who doesn't love the sound of a woman's voice? So you must be, you must not be straight. But what's interesting to me is that there's some relationship among all these things, in my opinion, among like the the penchant for rough sex that you see among very liberal women and the consumption of this new basically misogynistic content. Like there's some hunger for, I don't know, for this, not just among men but among women, I think. And I'll admit that I don't completely understand the hunger. um I would love to understand it better.
I would say that it's
um
most likely those women who are demanding rough sex had a high number of adverse childhood experiences, and
mhm.
they may be biologically compromised hormonally, whether they're sick, they have Hashimoto's or bipolar disorder or something. Their bodies are just so compromised that they can only accept that kind of abuse as love, because I certainly don't think that's the kind of relationship that like you have Erica and Charlie Kirk, or
Mhm.
Ron DeSantis and his wife, Barack and Michelle Obama, who are some other famous couples. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, I guess. Like I don't
Yeah.
foresee that happening. Like Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez. I don't
No,
see like those
I
are
was
go
my
ahead.
favorite couple. I was just thinking about this thing because somebody showed me their daughter. What is it? Or wait, are they not together anymore? Um, oh no, I think they divorced, didn't they? Never mind. Don't worry about it. I would embarrass myself if um,
You can embarrass yourself. It's
yeah,
okay.
so Monica Bellucci and Vincent Cassel, I think, is a great couple. But actually
All right.
they haven't been together in like over a decade. I never knew they were together until I saw their daughter, who's she's like very unique looking, the daughter. She kind of looks like
Okay.
both Monica Bellucci and Vincent Cassel. Um, but anyway, yeah, obviously in that situation you would never have like a Nick Fuentes type dynamic. Uh, and
I
yeah,
don't even think that's necessarily what Nick Fuentes wants
no,
because
probably not.
uh
I
no, and
would put
I'm
him
going
on
to
it.
choose to call him Nicholas because when he speaks about his mother, he says his mother calls him Nicholas. The way that Nicholas speaks about his mother is with such unconditional love that I don't truly
Mhm.
believe that's how he feels about women. I think that with him specifically, so I also grew up in Northern Illinois.
Mhm.
I can see how being in high school from like, oh my goodness, I can't even think of the years. 2011 to 2015, like when all of like peak slut shaming, feminist, sex positive culture was happening,
Mhm.
I could see how that could drive a young man who's already leaning towards the right into some kind of misogynistic views. And I think what we were talking about, the way social media has kind of just like, I don't even know how to put it, like stuff like Hinge, stuff, and I hate Hinge. It's so terrible. Stuff like
Uh-huh.
Hinge, stuff like Bumble, even Twitter. Twitter can be a dating app. I can see how
Yeah.
that kind of sucks the joy out of like any contemporary mating dance because there's not really a contemporary mating dance. It's all psychological, and it's all
Mhm.
psychological in the sense that it's directed at yourself. It's like you are, there is a relationship, but you're in the relationship competing against yourself almost. Does that make sense? Or am
Yeah,
I,
that's interesting. That's interesting. Um,
Taylor, does that make sense to you?
No. What do you mean competing against yourself?
You're competing against your own anxieties. And I would say, especially people under like 30, people under 35, when they're going on like a dating app or they're meeting someone and they're not getting texted back, they're being left on red or whatever, there's so much assumption.
Yeah.
There's so much anxiety that it's almost like you're just battling yourself.
Well,
yeah,
don't men and women have entirely different experiences on these apps?
yeah.
Well,
Although I
that's an
think that
interesting
anxiety
point.
is common. That anxiety, I think, is common between men and women.
Mm.
But yeah, definitely both men and women. I think men and women do have very different experiences.
I think as men become more like women, which is something that I found, there's more anxiety and everything.
Yeah, no, that's fair. What it's interesting. Something about what you said reminded me of. So there's this thesis that I've seen in a few places that marriage is seen less as in the past, marriage was something that it was like the start of your adult life, right? It's sort of like your coming out party. Okay, I have my partner, we're ready to start a family, we're ready to have a house together, right? And now it's seen instead as like the forgetting a lot of words tonight, but like the cusp or the
I saw that post. Yeah, it's like
you
the
know
culmination.
the culmination. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the um anyway, I'm forgetting the word, but I feel like what you're saying is part of that, because all this anxiety, a lot of it has to do with anxiety about like, how valuable am I, and am I really
Hmm.
going to have the sort of the marriage that cements my status as, it shows that I'm really good enough. It shows that I could get somebody smart and attractive and successful and so on. Um,
Well,
of
for a
course, I'm
lot
going
of
to be anxious about
women,
that.
yeah, for a lot of women, and I don't know how much of this is rage bait. I think some of it has to be, but as like a 28-year-old woman on Instagram, and as someone who's single, I do get served like a lot of like slop female dating strategy content. It's not like
Yeah.
true femmes. So there's true femcel female dating strategy, and that is not on Instagram. What's on
Yeah.
Instagram is like a very different millennial, like entitled version of it.
Mhm.
But young, like women under 35 who are not married are expecting someone who makes $1 million a year, someone who will drop everything to be with them. It's all about her, her, her. Where, in my opinion, and maybe this is where people get the idea that I'm trad, slightly, maybe, I guess. I am like a feminist and stuff. I think that marriage should be about building something. Marriage should be about building this great enterprise of a life with someone. Like it should be about having acres of land. It should be about growing your own food. It should be about building something beautiful as opposed to what can this person do for me?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I like that. I think it's just hard to think about getting back there. Um,
Don't you think that's
and
what the right is pushing right now? Do you feel that's what the
um,
isn't that what the
I think
narrative is?
I think it's probably what the rhetoric is. But I think if you look at the people on, like, if you look at dating discourse on the right, it has the same, like body count discourse is very much like, well, I couldn't really feel proud. It wouldn't really feel like an achievement to be with somebody with a high body count, right? You wouldn't really feel like
Hmm.
it wouldn't be a capstone. I think that's what they call it. It wouldn't really be a capstone to my life if I had to be with somebody with a terrible body count. And it's not, I don't want to get into body count discourse here, obviously, but I think you have a lot of the same trends, frankly. I think you have a lot of the same trends and a lot of the same approaches, for better or for worse, um, on the right in their attitudes towards these things.
Okay. So are topics like this discussed in this upcoming piece that you've been referencing?
Yeah, I think I touched on some of these things and some of the things that are coming up. I mean, one, you know, in this piece that I'm writing about, I call it the masculine mystique, which is obviously a really, pretentious name and, making a reference that I probably don't deserve to make or whatever. But um I was basically wondering like why are all these people, on the one hand, why are all these people making these cultural products where men are monsters? And why is that attractive to women? And why do women talk about getting the ick if men like order dessert or whatever? And why do women read books about like having sex with vampires and stuff like that? Um, and I was
Well,
just
I
sort
would
of thinking
say,
through,
so I want to interject there if I may.
yeah,
I would
yeah.
say that kind of so there's a renaissance of the Twilight films right now, and that's like
Mhm.
very much like my youth. Like going to see the Twilight films at midnight is like very much something my friends and I did growing up back when I had offline friends, like in middle school or whatever. I would say that that's very different than what you're seeing in something like Nosferatu, where Lily
Mhm.
Rose Depp is like, oh, I'm attracted to this monster or whatever.
It's
You think
different.
you think it's a big difference?
Yes, I do. I would say that Stephanie Meyer, her creation of the werewolves who are not even werewolves, they're shapeshifters, and they choose to shapeshift into a wolf. Her depiction of the Cullens, the vampire family, a lot of Twilight is actually about Mormonism and Mormon
Mhm.
ideas. That's why people don't drink coffee in Twilight. That's why Bella's
Oh yeah.
married at 19, whatever. I would say Stephanie Meyer is portraying like eternal life and like religious salvation, I would believe,
Mhm.
by way of like vampirism. And if Bella chose to become a werewolf, she couldn't even do that, or Bella being with Jacob, who was a shapeshifter slash werewolf. So I don't think that that idea of like monstrous men that's from now. That's not from the Twilight series, in my
Okay, so
opinion.
you,
Do
you
you
don't
have
you don't think the
feelings on that?
Twilight? Okay, I've never read or seen Twilight, to be honest. But I do know that 50
I've
Shades
read
of
them,
I
but Edward is definitely like Edward is definitely threatening to her, right?
Um, he's not so much, he's threatening to people who want to hurt her. I would agree
That's
that
true.
Edward
Right,
is
yeah.
threatening, but they're very uh blatantly depicted as like peaceful vampires because they're vegetarians, whereas you have characters like James and Victoria and the Volturi, they're depicted as evil because they drink blood. I mean, that's very clear that Stephanie Meyer takes like no, she very clearly, like in her writing, the rhetoric in the Twilight universe is that the vegetarian vampires are the ones on the right, and the vampires who are doing the traditional vampire thing are the ones who are damned.
I
And
see
I
what you
think
mean.
that, yeah, I think a lot of Edward's like agony comes from the fact that like oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing. I know so much about Twilight. But it was one of my favorite series growing up. I did read Midnight Sun when it came out, and that changed a lot about how I felt about Edward. I've always been ardently Team Jacob simply because I like wolves better than vampires. But Edward is very self-loathing. He's a very unhappy character, and I would say he's probably not even entirely happy when he marries Bella and they have their like little hybrid child or whatever. Um, Edward's probably one of the last, like, you know who he reminds me of almost is the protagonist in The Sorrows of Young Werther is who Edward
Uh-huh.
Cullen reminds me of. That's my answer to the question. I'll let you guys talk now.
No, that's good. I like that. I think that's a type of character that,
Doesn't exist anymore.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a type of character that was sort of, the sensitive young man. What happened to the sensitive young man? Well, like the feminists decided they were tired of them, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think that's a large part of it.
Well, I don't think that we
Um,
see the sensitive young man in film. I think that we see the sensitive young man in real life and on Instagram. I can't really think of anything I've watched recently that's shown like a sensitive young man as appealing, like
yeah.
romantically or sexually. I would think
I
he
mean,
would be
even
like an object of ridicule
yeah,
in some backhanded like sex positive feminist way where like going on 1,000,000 milligrams of birth control that completely destroys your hormonal balance, that's feminist or whatever. I apologize, you guys can
no,
talk now.
no, that's interesting. I was stuck on the Mormonism just because I had a Mormon in my life
Oh,
briefly, and I
briefly.
learned yeah, I learned a bit about Mormonism, but um, I was trying to match up what you were saying with some of their views. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so okay. So do you think this is okay? So you don't think Twilight fits, but do you think it's a real phenomenon overall? This monstrosization of men, women seem to need it. I mean, part of my theory is that, you have a sort of generational thing where feminism decided that men were monstrous, and then the next generation people said, well, we're still into them, so it must be that we're into monsters, and it just sort of compounded. Um, I don't know if that's a full explanation. Um,
I think that somewhere in there has to be like well, let me say that in a more respectful way. I would say that that monsterization of men is the answer to like kind of the feminization of men.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's sort of like women are like, well, they look around at the men that they see and they say, well, there are all these, what do you call them, like soft boys or whatever.
Hmm.
And they're just like, okay, I want whatever is the complete opposite of that, which I guess would be a
Yeah,
monster. Okay,
yeah.
that's interesting. On Hinge that you were talking about hating Hinge. On Hinge these days, I see a lot of like, I want a liberal cowboy. I've seen
Ugh.
that profile like 5 times, which is it's really funny to me because I'm neither. Um, but I do think there's this, in
Well,
saying that,
I have the
there's
spirit
this
of a
like,
cowboy, but go on.
uh-huh. No. Yeah, I think these women would love you. Um, but I think it's interesting because in saying that, there's a kind of acknowledgement that there's a sort of prima facie contradiction between being a cowboy and being a liberal. Like not just a cultural contradiction, but there's this idea that there's like, okay, if you're the sort of liberal man who will match with me politically, and in the sort of cities that I use Hinge in, is the majority of people, then okay, something is going to make it hard for you to be super masculine, but that's also simultaneously also what I want. Um, the other thing I see a lot of is this, it'll say something like, what energy do you want, or something like that. And the woman will put something like, I want a guy who like says, I made reservations at this restaurant at this time, wear this dress, I'll pick you up. Like somebody who basically just like, maybe this is what you were saying about the trad wife. Like there's a sort of desire. And this is the answer like the answer to the baby girl question. So the baby girl question is like, why would powerful women want to be powerless in sex or in their relationships? Um, and what powerful women say is like, I make hard decisions all day and I want to come home and not have to make decisions anymore, right? But the thing is
I
like,
would.
that's also what a lot of women say when they don't have a lot of power. Like they're like, oh, I have a hard day at my part-time job, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Part-time. Okay.
well, yeah, I've heard that. It's just like, yeah, I have a hard enough life. I want my man to make some decisions for me.
Well, then you could, let's think about the ages of these women. So let's say they're all under 25. So that would
mm,
make their parents, would that be millennial or Gen X? Their parents would
uh,
most likely be Gen X. Have
I,
you ever like,
yeah,
have you ever spoken to a Gen X woman?
yeah.
like the example that they said. My mother is Gen X, and I just kind of watched her walk all over my father and her boyfriend.
Interesting.
So I just kind of think of like what I'm thinking from my teacher brain right now. I think what has
Mhm.
been modeled for them that they want that. So when
That's
these women,
interesting. Yeah.
when they see like what, for example, when I see like my Gen X mother, like treat her partner like a dog or treat my father like a dog, even after their
Mhm.
divorce. I think I never want to act like that. And that sets an example for me how I never want to act in relationships. Now, that doesn't make me do a full 180 and say, oh, I want my husband to order me around or whatever. It just kind of shows me what I don't want. And I think that what, in my personal opinion, and forgive me if this is completely if I'm in a completely different realm than you right now, but I feel what we're seeing and what you have described is more easily attributed to like poor parenting, attachment issues, and like really having no role models for healthy relationships. Because if you think about the average American who's 21 years old, think about the world that they've grown up in.
Mhm.
The majority of their relationships are digital. The majority of their families are splintered. They may have one parent, they may have no parent, they may have been raised by the state. Um, and having some sort of stability in what you've described, here's this dress, I'm picking you up at this time, we're going to this restaurant. Maybe they look to it as some sort of grounding force in their life when everything else is chaotic. Because, the experience of a girl who graduated from Bard College with both parents in her life, and
I
now she's
I
getting
went
her
to
MS.
Bard College.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I was rejected from Bard. I would have loved to go
Uh,
there. But so let's say a girl who went to Bard College for her BA, and both her parents are in her home or whatever, her life is
mhm.
stable, and she's not gonna take that kind of abuse from, I'm not even using the word abuse necessarily. She's not going to take that kind of treatment from anyone, especially like if the parents are liberal and they're like rah rah women or whatever. But you take a girl who grew up in, let's see, Carbondale, has no father in her life, didn't go to college, works at Walmart. A man like that comes along, she's going to say, finally, some stability, finally, some rest, even if he is inherently monstrous. I mean, have you thought about Ted Bundy at all in your writing of this? Because he
No, but
would
I know.
be,
I mean, I know that there's a perennial attraction of women to criminals and things like that. Obviously, men have odd. I don't know if you know the Twitter account. I don't even know if it still exists, but mug shotties. It's
yeah,
like, hot women's mug shots. Um, so there
I
is,
don't
I don't know.
understand male sexuality whatsoever. I mean, I think
It's
it
very
seems simple.
egalitarian. It's
Oh, okay.
very,
Thank you.
yeah, it's very like, well, I mean, it's good and bad, right? It's very, you know, very few people are excluded from it.
All
Um,
right. I've heard
which
that
is,
men are visual creatures. Would you say that's accurate?
I
Or at
think
least,
that's certainly right. I never thought about it about myself until I started to understand female sexuality, which you know, often requires like a kind of narrative and it requires the man to sort of
do you feel
occupy.
that in your writing of this article you fully understand female sexuality? Would you
No,
describe yourself
certainly
as a
not.
so you're not a subject matter expert in that?
I'm certainly not a subject matter expert. Um, but I think one thing that I've found consistently, or pretty consistently, is that, and this, I don't know if this goes with female sexuality in general or with the narcissism that we were talking about earlier, but I think there's a consistent thing where, um, not all, and not all women, hashtag,
All
but
right.
I
Noted.
think plenty of women, they have to sort of be able to tell themselves a story about like, here's what it says about me that I'm sleeping with this person. Um, and it can't, that story can't be like a negative, right? It can't be like I'm a disaster. Um, and that's why I'm sleeping with this person. You sort of there needs to be something narratively to latch on to, that has to do with, framing the choice in terms of some sort of identity. Um, I don't know how widespread that is. I don't know who it applies to. I don't even know. with people in my life, I don't even know what story they would tell themselves. I don't know what it means to spend time with me. Um, there's this Patrice O'Neill had this old skit about uh he was this black comic, I think from Boston, who he was really large and ended up dying, and people were very sad. Um, but he had this sketch, he had not a sketch, he just had this bit where he would say, he would be worried about his girlfriend trading up for like a better guy, and then the joke is that the girl doesn't need to worry about him trading up because it's all the same to him. Like if he sees like a drunk girl passed out in a dumpster or something, that's like that's great too. So it's certainly less picky um than female sexuality, and some of the question of what does it take to make this choice seem like a good one, um I think can be a lot more elaborate for a woman than for a man, especially in a modern, like, I think the sort of contemporary hypersexualization probably affects men and women differently. Um, and I think sometimes it's assumed that men are sort of in their natural state in like a world of pornography and Hinge and Tinder and all these things. And I think that's also a dangerous assumption. Um, I don't think men are in their natural state um, in these things. So yeah, I don't know. That was a really unclear answer that probably had a lot of cancelable notions in it.
Well, it's all right. I can edit out anything you'd like me to,
Oh,
but
no, no, no.
thankfully,
I wouldn't worry about
yeah, I have not cussed this evening. And
it.
that's something that I feel like on the dating market, my father was like, this is like my dad was like, Emily, I don't like when women cuss. I don't like it, especially at the dinner table. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, that's not a bad habit. That's not a bad mindset to adopt, in my opinion. And I feel like that, I don't know, there's so much godless behavior out there nowadays. Victim Radio is a Christian podcast, by the way, if the
Mhm.
listeners, and that's not clear to anyone. But there's so much godless behavior. I'm not certain what the answer is. I don't know. I'm not certain what the answer is for young people. When I was teaching in high school, teaching 9 through 12, I would, and let me state this in like an objective, like non-weird way. But kids did find each other. I mean, whether or
Yeah.
not they stayed together after high school, you go to college, kids do find each other. Um,
Yeah, are you at all
socialization.
tempted to say like, because sometimes I see these people who seem like hopeless, but then what is the line from Jurassic Park? Like nature finds a way. Are you at all tempted to say just like, look, whatever the culture, we have really strong biological drives, and that's likely to just overpower a lot of this stuff.
So I
Are,
would
are,
almost say, I would say that that is something you have to attain, and there are a million things impeding your access to it. So if you're tapping into any kind of biological drive, first of all, you have to be healthy. Your health can't be compromised. Second of all, you have to be offline because there's nothing happening through a computer, at least for most normal people. You need to kind of have so many factors in the green to tap into that biology. And this goes back into what I was discussing before. A lot of these young women are not healthy. A lot of these young women are chronically ill. A lot of these young women are on birth control, which, on the record, I've said this before, I think birth control is one of the worst things for women. I think it's one of the
Mhm.
worst things to happen for women. And I think that the politicizing of it as female empowerment is like a giant trick that actually destroys female health. So going back to what you said, can you throw it all away and say biology is supreme? Maybe 25 years ago you could.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say 10 years ago. I wouldn't even say 15 years ago. I would say 20, 25 years ago. For my mother's generation, certainly. For my father's generation, certainly. For everyone that came before them, absolutely. But now there's way too many things. I'm thinking of in Pokemon Red when you can't get to the next town because a Snorlax is blocking it. There's too many things
You need a
blocking that.
flute, right?
Yeah, you need a
You need the
flute,
poke
exactly.
flute.
Yeah, the poke flute, exactly. And there's no game shark. There's no game shark for these young
Mhm.
people. Um, so I would say
What is
it,
the problem that you worry about in this regard? Do you worry about people being alone, or do you worry about fertility and replacement, or like what do you think is the really bad thing that's going on? Like if you were to articulate what is the problem, what would be the first thing
um
that comes to mind?
I would say that the problem is the internet, which is a giant unconscious mind, and the internet, anyone who has any sort of money or political influence can saturate its message online. Um, Kids are vulnerable, adults are vulnerable. Um, Things can get just kind of ideas beamed into your brain. Algorithms can anticipate what you're doing. Like I can get a Target push notification if I drive by Target. There's so much just like designed to distract you and pull you
Yeah.
away from what I believe is the central meaning of life, which is human connection and
Hmm.
love, ideally. I would say that the issue at hand is disconnection, misunderstanding. And I do think that, and this isn't exclusive to America, I think that there's a huge mental health crisis on our planet right now. And I do attribute some of it to like the industrialization of our food supply, some of it to the internet. I mean, I'm certain there's PubMed articles out there exactly documenting what the internet does to our brains, but who could ever anticipate it? And I know that this is such a boring, dull line. I get so sick of people talking about AI, but I really have had the opportunity to witness the internet change and shift. Like there was this NPR, I can't believe I just said that. There was this NPR interview like 2 or 3 years ago when I was living in Rockford, and it really struck me because it was this guy who wrote a book about the internet as algorithmic versus chronological. I think that when the internet shifted from being chronological to algorithmic, a lot of these kind of like, I would almost say spiritual disorders, like an inability to effectively connect with other people, virtue signaling, capitalistic signaling through stuff like, I mean, we were speaking about the performative male earlier. You could
Yeah.
say like matcha is like a performative thing right now because you're not drinking coffee, you're drinking matcha, so you're different.
Hmm.
Um,
And you
so
think
to
these are
an
all essentially algorithmic in some sense?
um, I think they're a product of an algorithmic hive mind that we
Hmm.
all log into every day. And I don't even think that we'll ever know what it's doing to us.
Yeah. You know, they used to have before people worried about algorithms, there was this worry about what they called big data. Um, and this question of sort of like we worried about this a lot in the early days of anti-woke. So we
The
would talk
early
about,
days
okay,
of anti-woke, that's
the
great.
early days of anti-woke, yeah, about, like a decade ago. Um, there was this worry that, okay, life is increasing, like kids are increasingly defining themselves in terms of what demographic categories they're a member of. And we felt that this had something to do with like, this is basically the way that like like big data understands people as well, right? They have to categorize people into here's what this demographic is watching and buying. Okay, so market it to them. Here's what this demographic is watching and buying. Okay, market that to them, right?
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so I think yeah, we had basically the big data worry before the algorithmic worry. But they're pretty similar.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Can you give me a better idea of the world that you grew up in? Are you like
Yeah,
38,
yeah.
39? I'm
Yeah, I'm
guessing?
38.
Oh,
Good guess.
spot on.
Really good
Yeah.
guess. I grew up in a sort of small town, but not rural, in Pennsylvania. I wouldn't call it
Elite.
mid-sized. I wouldn't call it mid-sized because sometimes if you say mid-sized, people are thinking like Denver. It was much smaller than Denver. It was maybe, I don't know, 40 or 50,000 people, I forget. Um, and after that, I was an early adopter of the internet. I started using the internet when I was maybe 5 years old in say
Oh,
1992 or 93. One of the first things I did on the internet, my brothers and I would play on the Internet Chess Club. We were chess
Oh,
players, and we would play. And
how
back then, like
cerebral.
in the really early days of the internet, to play chess, you would have, ASCII, ASCII, there's 256 characters, right? And
Is
you
that
would
how
have a
you say it?
chessboard.
A
Yeah, I say ASCII.
ASC. I would say
Yeah, I
I
say
would describe
ASCII.
it
Yeah.
as okay. I would say ASCII. But
Okay,
go
yeah, probably
on.
that's what most people say. But we you would have to play chess. You would have the board instead of an image, the board would be drawn in ASCII characters. So like the
Oh wow.
underlines and so obviously it would go very slowly, and you would type a move in response to the board that you got. Um, and But this was overcome with interfaces, and we were still on whatever it was, 28.8 baud modems back then. And eventually, when you got the 56K modem, that was really, really fast. Um, uh, and then, the internet kept improving. We got the Nintendo 64, we got Windows 95.
Yeah.
To my mind, like that's like when the modern contemporary era begins. You got Napster, you got music downloading services, but I mean, when I was a kid, to download music off of Napster, you would start the download at night so that it would be finished by the time you woke up. Like music would download very, very slowly. And then
Yeah.
I got to college at Bard, and there was we had something called DC++, where you could just download music from other people on campus basically instantly. Which of course is the speed that you do now, just over the internet. And this is before smartphones and things like that. Um,
I used something
and
called What CD in high school, but I don't think that it exists anymore.
That's interesting.
Go on. I
Yeah,
apologize for
back then,
interrupting.
no, nothing to apologize about. Back then we had just different kinds of internet forums,
Yeah.
and games, and there was a little bit of like quasi, you know, there were social games you would play as like a little avatar, like an RPG, but you would just go around and talk to people. Oh, and there was also, the way I made a lot of my earliest friends on the internet was there was something called AOL Instant Messenger. And there were other instant messaging services. Yahoo had one, and there was also one called ICQ. And you could just search for people based on like age and interest. So if you wanted to talk to somebody who, like another 13-year-old who liked video games, you would search for that. And people actually
I
found each other this way and
I
would
hope
add
it
each
was a
other.
13-year-old.
Well, who
I
knows?
ho-
Who knows? Back then, we didn't worry about stuff like that so much. Like it was kind of the Wild West back then. And a lot of us would get like added to these big AOL Instant Messenger chat rooms and stuff. Um, and then when I got admitted to college, I was like, oh, we should all be AOL Instant Messenger friends, and we had like 3 college chat rooms like that. Um, it was all very odd. And then I think it was around when I graduated college that I started to look at some of the weirder parts of the internet. Um, and then certainly around a decade ago, uh, it was sort of a necessity to understand what was going on with Trump.
Mhm.
Um, that you had to have like at least a cursory knowledge of like 4chan
Yeah.
and some of those things. Um, yeah.
I would say that I started going on 4chan like in ninth grade, but I would only go on the
Okay.
comic
Yeah.
board. Growing up, I would download CBR files from the comic board on 4chan, and I would open them in an Android emulator. And I believe it was like Android Carrot or Android Milkshake back when it was named after food. And that would be the only way I could read like new comic books because I had no car and I couldn't drive to the comic book store. And
Mhm.
that kind of taught me how to use, and IRC channels were already fading away at that point. This would have been
Yeah.
like 2011 or 2012. But I learned how to use IRC channels. I would connect with other people who were interested in like comic books, and I got super into the paranormal board and like near death experiences. I would go like on the paranormal board's IRC channel or whatever. And then it taught me a lot about like how to use the computer because it really, and you have to really learn how to do things like in internet environments like that because no one's going to explain it to you because they're going to call you something that starts with new. I will not say it on this podcast, but you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
want to You don't want to be called that word. And you know what's funny is people are now repurposing that word for people who are just getting into Nick Fuentes. But
Uh-huh.
it it taught me a lot about how to use the computer because I had to absorb a lot of technical knowledge to do the things that I wanted to do. And that kind of brought me into I had a Nexus S1 at the time. Like I can picture the
Mhm.
phone in my hand right now. It was just this tiny, awful little phone that was the Google flagship. I installed a custom operating system on it, so I could do whatever I wanted. I could pirate whatever I wanted. To me, the internet represented freedom when I was growing up. It was freedom from, I'll admit, a turbulent home life. It was freedom from whatever I was facing with my health at that time. It was freedom from being unable to connect with peers in my age group. So I guess that I would say the experience overall, when I look back at using the internet in my formative years, it was mostly empowering. And then I think around like my sophomore year of high school, I got on Twitter, and that was pretty fun because I learned like, oh, you can just be as funny as possible and people want to be your friends. Like I recall one of my most popular posts on my old account, I conjugated the word Benghazi because it happened recently. And that was like my crown jewel tweet. But I don't have access to that account anymore. I don't know if that gives you a better understanding of kind of
Yeah.
the world I grew up in.
I mean, it's very, I think there's this word you mentioned, and I know nothing about Nick Fuentes. I don't know, I don't know the first thing about Nick Fuentes. But yeah, it's funny that the internet used to be, um, I mean, I grew up early enough to be on the internet when not many people were on it, you know? Um, and I thought of it as this weird thing I did, this weird part of my life.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously that isn't what it is now.
Where, yeah, you
Um,
have. So, yes, when I was teaching in New Mexico, it's like I had a ninth grader tell me about Chris Chan getting arrested. And I'm like, what's wrong with you?
yeah.
Go throw a frisbee. Come on. I don't want to hear about Chris Chan in my classroom. Like, why do you? And that's what's interesting about this demographic of kids coming into the workforce, coming into college, is they are super knowledgeable. They do know a lot. They're just too anxious to share it. They're very socially conscious. But they're, and this is such like a boring Washington Post phrase, but they are truly digital natives. Whereas I feel like what you have described, you kind of had to learn how to use the internet, and I had to learn how to use the internet. Like I
Yeah.
remember using a VPN to pirate things from the Pirate Bay because I didn't want my parents to find out I was pirating. I think it was HBO's Bored to Death. I didn't want a
Mhm.
letter getting sent to my house saying I was committing the crime of piracy.
Yeah, yeah, I
Um,
remember the worries about piracy.
yeah, and that just like doesn't exist anymore. Like everything is subscription based. Everything
Yeah.
you have to purchase.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to pirate things than it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, I had a long time, I guess I'm admitting to crimes or something, but I had a long time when I basically wouldn't pay to watch anything. I always had a way to find live sports, TV series, movies. Um, and of course now, I make, a normal adult salary, which I didn't for a lot of my adult life. So I don't worry about it too much. But um, yeah, I think the Netflixification is also that plus
Net
better.
Netflixification. So
Yeah,
was that term mentioned in like a think piece or was that straight off the dome?
that was off the dome.
Oh, very
Uh,
nice. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I'm full of them. That's why I am who I am. But yeah, I think that has also changed the internet and they probably have better tools for sussing out copyright infringement.
Hmm.
Um, but I also, I don't know. This is something that I meant to ask about when you asked about like will there be a cultural renaissance of writing? Like, It's not impossible. Like, these things have gotten better our whole lives, right? We've gone from me, 5 years old, 14.4K modem, playing chess as like little, characters. And, now could you imagine a world in which like most content is like generated ad hoc by AI? Like, instead of everybody watching the same TV show, you actually just type into the AI and you say, here's what I want. I want the male lead to look like this. I want the female lead to look like this. I want it to be a cop procedural. I want the villain to be this person. Like, I don't know. For some reason, that prospect really worries me.
Yeah, I feel like if we're going to get into AI, my thing with AI coming from someone who has to grade and everything,
Yeah.
it's very obvious when something is written by AI.
No,
I
it
don't even
certainly
have
is
to
now.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like this, it's insincere. I can tell when something is AI produced, it lacks sincerity. I think that where AI is most powerful is creating manga posters for victim radio. No, I think AI has it certainly has its uses. What I've taken flack from this from some parties, but I talked to our last episode with Matthew Gazda, and I was like, oh, okay, he says that he does it too, so maybe I'm not a fraud. I think what's most interesting about AI is that you can ask it questions and ask it how it feels. It's almost kind of like consulting an oracle. Whereas if you're getting it to produce like empty content for you, it's soulless. But if you ask it, how does this poem make you feel? How does this short story make you feel? Did you understand this part? Did you understand that part? I think that's where it truly, truly shines. In terms of AI generated television shows, so you've been offline for a hot minute. There was
Yeah.
did you see the Will Stansel show pilot that was completely AI generated from Sora
No.
at all?
That's funny though.
You should look that up. That was really, really good.
Okay.
Will
Stansel.
Yeah, that was a really good post.
Okay.
I don't think AI will ever be able to like replicate high tier posting. Like, we'll never have an AI drill. I feel like we may be drawing to a close because I think that we've spoken for nearly 2 hours now. Is there anything else? Yeah. I had a good time. Thank you.
No, I had a good time. I wish we had solved this question about, what right wingers should really do to resuscitate the culture and to write better. But I think, to me, the thing that we really need is you just need people with, immense drive and talent, which is rare, I think, everywhere now. I think it's hard to think of anybody now who's like at the level of like, I don't know, a Dostoevsky or a Melville, or I don't know.
We are not rearing our best.
No, that's right. I think that's my worry across every
who do you
group
think
of
we're
culture
rearing?
producers.
Who do you think we're rearing?
Patience.
I don't know what that means.
We are
I think she means
rearing
mental patience.
we are rearing patience for the medical and pharmaceutical industry is my answer to that.
Victim Radio.
I think I'm not maybe heaven bound. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make heaven.
Victim Radio. Victim Radio. Victim Radio.
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make heaven.
Victim Radio. Victim Radio.
I think I'm not maybe heaven bound.
Victim Radio.
This is Victim Radio. You listen to Victim Radio, the only literary podcast from X.com.
Subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Victim Radio for exclusive close readings of online lit stories.
Follow us on X.com at @_Victim Radio. Our website is victimradio.live. This was Victim Radio. You will hear from Victim Radio again listen to Victim Radio.
Victim Radio.